What up guys, Silent Turtles here, back at it again with another reaction style video. So today we're looking at a viewer request. It is Star Wars Duel the Fates explanation by Dave Filoni. The video is done by The Star Wars Life. Looks like it's a link to another one. Anyways, let's hop right in and see what we got going for us.
Prequels, I thought, were almost an impossible task. How do you tell the story that we've all grown up with imagining who Anakin Skywalker was? You saw so many things in Phantom Menace that you just had imagined, like the Jedi Council, and none of it really was what I had expected. But I know now that that's just like how creative George is. Like, he just sees it differently, and he's laying it down. And I love the lightsaber fight with Darth Maul, not because it's a lightsaber fight, but because George is so good at crafting why that fight's important every time. Like, you know, the ObiWan Darth Vader fight isn't like the most wonderfully staged necessarily combat that you're ever going to see, but there's so much at stake. It's so meaningful when Obi-Wan dies that we all feel like Luke. In Phantom Menace, you're watching these two Jedi in their prime fight this evil villain. Maul couldn't be more obviously the villain. He's designed to look evil, and he is evil, and he just expresses that from his face all the way out through the type of lightsaber he fights with. What's at stake is really how Anakin's going to turn out. Because Qui Gon is different than the rest of the Jedi, and you get that in the movie, and Qui Gon is fighting because he knows he's the father that Anakin needs.
Dang. Calling him the father that Anakin needs. That's bold. It's not necessarily wrong, because depending on how they win this fight, if Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan live, who teaches Anakin? If Obi-Wan dies and Qui-Gon lives, how does Qui-Gon recover from Obi-Wan's death, and does that affect the teaching of Anakin? And with Qui-Gon dying and Obi-Wan living, we know how Anakin turns out. And I would say Obi-Wan's definitely not in his prime during this fight, and maybe not even Qui-Gon is. But they're both skilled Jedi at the time, even though Obi-Wan's still younger. And I do agree with the fact that he says Darth Maul is 100% villain.
Because Qui-Gon hasn't given up on the fact that Jedi are supposed to actually care and love, and that's not a bad thing. The rest of the Jedi are so detached, and they've become so political that they've really lost their way. And Yoda starts to see that in the second film. But Qui-Gon is ahead of them all. And that's why he's not part of the council. So he's fighting for Anakin, and that's why it's the duel of the fates. It's the fate of this child. And depending on how this fight goes, his life is gonna be dramatically different. So Qui-Gon loses, of course. So the father figure, because he knew what it meant to take this kid away from his mother when he had an attachment, and he's left with Obi-Wan. Obi-Wan trains Anakin at first out of a promise he makes to Qui-Gon, not because he cares about him. When they get Anakin, when they find him on Tatooine, he says, "Why do I feel like we've found another useless life form?" He's comparing Anakin to Jar Jar.
Excuse me.
And he's saying, this is a waste of our time. Why are we doing this? Why do you see importance in these creatures like Jar Jar Binks and this 10-year-old boy? This is useless. So he's a brother to Anakin eventually, but he's not a father figure. That's a failing for Anakin.
Big facts right there. First off, I didn't know they did a round table like this. This is super cool. Second off, the line where he was like, "You were like a brother to me." That is a huge difference, because even though he was still a mentor, there's a difference in being a friend and a mentor and being a father and a mentor. You learn things differently, you develop differently, and that is a key factor in that fight and the decision of basically the entire line of films from that point on. It's a completely different story if Qui-Gon lives during that fight. It changes how Anakin would have turned out, and we might have never had the original film series if Qui-Gon lives there. That's a big factor point, that if you change that, everything's different.
He doesn't have the family that he needs. He loses his mother in the next film. He fails on this promise that he made to Mother, "I will come back and save you." So he's left completely vulnerable. And Star Wars ultimately is about family. So that moment in that movie, which a lot of people I think diminish into just a cool lightsaber fight, but it's everything that the entire 3 films of the prequels hangs on, is that one particular fight. And Maul serves his purpose, and at that point died before George may bring him back. But he died, and that's showing you again how the Emperor is completely self-serving. He doesn't care, he's just a tool, and he's using people and now he's going to use this child. That follows all the way through to the line which terrified me as a kid when the Emperor tells Luke, "You, like your father, are now mine." And the idea when I was a little kid watching that movie of some evil person possessing my father, making him do things or making him be evil was terrifying. That was like a thought that was horrible. Also, it's amazing when you watch Return of the Jedi that Luke has never done anything that I would call it like he's a bad character. He has like a tendency to be dark, and a lot of people wanted Anakin, oh, he should have been darker as a character. It's not true at all. I believe Luke would turn to the dark side in Return of the Jedi. I believe that was on the table. I believe that he would kill the Emperor, and because of the way George arranged the story, I knew that was the wrong thing to do. When he's saying, you know, you want your weapon, you know, strike me down, I am defenseless. He wants him to give into his anger. He wants him to give into his hate and the fear, the structure that George has laid out in all the movies.
See, that's a big thing, though. Like, that's also another big turning point. If Luke does that, then the films from that point on are completely different. But I feel like, to me, Luke's character is more of a sign of hope, of redemption. Even though he didn't have someone... I mean, he kind of had a father figure, I guess. Someone that was, you know, real firm about everything, but he didn't have his actual father. It kind of changes the dynamic of how he grew up, you know, and the fact that he was able to take his teachings from Yoda and ObiWan and reflect on that and reflect on what Darth Vader did, aka his father, and how he turned out. I think he was able to be that bit of hope that really shined through, and to not allow him to go to the dark side, that would have changed everything. Which I think, like, what if they did like a what if, like what they did with Marvel? Like, that would be kind of a cool idea. I mean, it might, I don't know, Star Wars fans are different than a lot of Marvel fans, though. They don't really, a lot of people don't like the what if stuff. Like, what if Luke killed Palpatine there and joined his father? How would that have, like, changed everything? There could be like a little series based on that. But anyways, it's just a big turning point.
It's coming
right
to
there.
fruition now. And the only thing that's going to save him is not his connection to the Force. It's not the powers he's learned. It's not all these things that are an advantage to him. That's gotten him to the table. But what saves Luke is his ability to look at all that and look at his father and say, no, I'm going to throw away this weapon. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to let that go and be selfless. And he says, you know, I am a Jedi like my father before me. But what he's really saying, and why I connect so powerfully to it, is like he's saying, I love my father, and there's nothing you can do that's going to change that.
And even though
the Emperor can't understand that connection. Why wouldn't you take this? I'm offering you power of the galaxy. Why won't you take this? And Anakin then in that moment has to decide to be the father that he's never had. He has to give up all the power of the galaxy and save his son. And that's the selfless act that he does in return for his son. And that's what saves him in turn. So the son said
You also have to think, though, that, like, all those years Vader was thinking about the mistakes that he may have made. And then having to kill his old master, everything's just weighing really heavily on his mind. Luke showing up. It really is a big factor on how this plays out.
the father fathers his son, and it works out perfectly. And I draw that line all the way from Phantom Menace to Jedi. That's the story of Star Wars.
So when he
Everything
pops the
else,
helmet, you're saying when he pops the helmet off in that moment was part of the
yeah,
fated arc.
It's all part of the Vader. It's all part of like why it works and why we care. It's not about X-wings. It's not about all the things we decorate Star Wars in. It's important. It's part of the genius of it. But we soulfully react like we don't just want an action movie. We want to feel uplifted. And Star Wars is an adventure that makes you feel good. You know, it makes me feel like, wow, I want to be a part of that. So that's what I always go back to.
It's even after, you know, Luke was abandoned as a child and all the hardships that he went through and all the bad things his father did, he was able to forgive him in the end. And I think that shows just how good of a person is, like Luke is. And I think that really solidifies him as somebody who's understanding and a big beacon of hope.
Star Wars is this selfless act and this family dynamic, which is so important to George, so important to the foundation of Star Wars. That's in us, and what I like about it is it is really saying there is a lot of hope out there, that we fundamentally want to be good people, that we can all be driven to do terrible things, but that we can persevere through selfless action. So George has this hopeful story, and it's something that he's reiterated most times I've seen him, you know, after we've been making things without him, is remember to make these stories hopeful. Remember
100%.
to give that to kids because they really need it. And so that's just something to keep in mind.
Exactly like you said, it's much bigger than a movie or a show. People are really affected by these things. It affects their real lives. And by giving people these characters that overcome all these tough odds, it allows people to feel the hope that is portrayed in the shows and the movies and everything like that. And I think even though a lot of the movies get a lot of flack, even the sequel trilogy gets a lot of flack, I think there are parts of every trilogy that bring hope to people. You know, there's key moments that it's like, I don't know, it makes them what they are. And I feel like even though people don't enjoy some of them, they're that way for a reason. I also really like how they brought Hayden Christensen back for the Force Ghost at the end. I do think that maybe if they were going to do that, they should have changed ObiWan, but it's really hard to get rid of OG ObiWan. But anyways, yeah, I just like the aspect of hope. I really like Return of the Jedi for that reason. It just shows how good of a character Luke is, that he's able to do what his father could not and overcome those odds. And I think it's also cool to see Vader go back to being Anakin, and you know, even though he wasn't a father and he didn't have one, he was able to realize in the end, like, hey, I'm making a mistake, and I can kind of rectify this a little bit by helping my son in this moment. So anyways, it was really cool. I didn't know they did like a round table like that. I'm gonna have to check some more stuff out to see if there's anything else like that. I think that was neat. Let me know what you guys thought down below. Like, comment, subscribe, and like always, I'll see you on the next video.